Wow. Just wow. That seriously is the best way to describe this movie because it truly is wow in so many ways. And I'm so excited and so happy that we can finally talk about Spider-Man No Way Home. This has been an absolutely insane journey. I've been talking about this movie on the channel for, I think, like, really over 2 years at this point since Spider-Man Far From Home came out, and now it's finally here, and I'm just so excited that we can finally talk about it. Not only to be talking about specifically this movie, but also for me to just do a movie review, because I haven't done a movie review in the longest time, because most of the time I don't get to see these movies until they come out on DVD and Blu-ray. So this is like a once in a while opportunity to actually get to see a big movie like this opening weekend and be able to do a review on it. And that's just something I'm so excited to talk about, because this movie specifically, there is so much to talk about with Spider-Man No Way Home. Which is why I'm just warning you ahead of time. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but I have a pretty good feeling it's probably going to be a long one because, like I said, there's just so much to talk about. Because this movie, it's not just a good Spider-Man movie, but it's a good superhero movie. It's just a good movie in general, a great movie. And there's just so much I absolutely love about this, and really the whole experience of watching this film, because of course, I wore my Spider-Man socks, because of course I did. I also got a cool Spider-Man No Way Home shirt from EpicHeroShop.com. Shout out to Epic Hero Shop. I love their shirts. Actually, my first shirt I got from them, and it's with Toby, Andrew, and Tom Holland Spider-Man on there doing the Spider meme of them pointing at each other. Great shirt. Absolutely love it. 10 out of 10, love it, highly recommend. So I had the Spider-Man outfit, I was all ready to go, and this movie just blew me away. And I was like both expecting it and not expecting it at the same time, because like I said, we've been talking about this movie for so long, our expectations were set so high, and then when the movie first came out, like after the world premiere and everything, I was watching other people's reviews, and they were saying like, our expectations weren't even high enough because it's even better than we thought it'd be. But I was still kind of skeptical, like, is it really though? But it is. This film just has so much going on with it. I mean, I laughed, I cried, I had fun with it. It was both dark and emotional, but also funny at other times. It's just the perfect mixture of what I want from a superhero movie, and really just a movie in general. I absolutely loved it. And again, because this is something we've been talking about for 2 years now, obviously we've been talking about all the rumors and the leaks and all that stuff. So there's a lot about this movie that I knew about going into it, but there were still surprises that I did really enjoy. And some things that were leaked that I did know about, there was one thing that I thought I would absolutely hate, but I actually ended up being one of my favorite parts of the movie, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. But yeah, it was just so many surprises here in a good way. Even some of my theories came true. I actually, last week I did a final predictions video for Spider-Man No Way Home, breaking down my final biggest theories and all that stuff. And if I'm being honest, pretty much all of those ended up coming true. Which again, kind of makes it less satisfying, because then I knew it was going to happen, but also at the same time satisfying as well, because like I was smart enough to figure it out. Which, I'm pretty proud of myself. But yeah, guys, we have got to talk about this thing, and obviously, if you couldn't tell already, we're talking spoilers, like major spoilers. If you have not seen this movie, first of all, I don't know what you're even doing on this video, but if you are for some reason still here, don't watch it. Just don't do it. You need to experience this film on your own, even if you've read all the leaks and everything. It's a huge difference between hearing about it and reading about it and actually seeing it come to life on screen. It's a completely different experience. So if you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. But guys, spoilers. There's so many spoilers in this movie, which again, a lot of it we knew about, but others we didn't. So in this video, I'm going to go ahead and break down really all the biggest parts of this movie. The biggest moments, the biggest characters, biggest reveals, cameos, and all that good stuff. We're breaking it all down here. I'm going to kind of try and go in order for the most part, just so you get that kind of recreation of the film experience here. And there's a lot going on, which first of all, I just want to talk about what was kind of set up in the Far From Home post-credit scene, where Mysterio outed Peter Parker as Spider-Man. He was framed for the murder of Mysterio, and this movie picks up directly with that, and I love that. I mean, they released the opening scene of this on, I think it was like one of the, morning shows or something like that, like Good Morning America. I don't know if it was that show specifically, but it was one of those things where, I think it was one of the late shows actually with Seth Meyers. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, they already revealed the opening scene, but actually seeing it here, just the whole tone that it set for this movie was so good, and I was worried that hearing about all these multiverse things in this movie, that they kind of just skip over and kind of ignore the whole fallout of that post-credit scene. But the whole movie kind of focuses on that, because that's why Peter goes to Doctor Strange in the first place. And I loved all those moments in the beginning with all of our characters living in this new life, and kind of shows like what the life of a celebrity is kind of like, both like the good sides and the bad sides, like the darker sides of that life. Because obviously you've got his supporters, but then you've also got the ones who believe that he murdered Mysterio and absolutely hate him and are hunting him down and everything. But again, it's like both sides of that, but now Peter just has no more privacy at all. And of course that affects not only Peter Parker, but also his friends, including his girlfriend, Michelle Jones Watson, which is revealed in this movie, which I think is interesting. And when it first happened, I liked it. Now, after watching the movie, I'm not the biggest fan of it, just because, that now this is like the Mary Jane of our universe, basically. And that, like, by the end of the movie, they're not together. So, I don't know. We'll see where it goes. But I do also like that MJ in this movie wasn't just a damsel in distress. She was actually an asset to the team. So I did enjoy that. Also, Ned. There's not really much to say about him. I still really enjoyed his character. He was still really funny. The guy in the chair. I loved him doing the magic with the sling ring and everything. He was a really fun character. But another character here, there was another friend of Spider-Man that didn't really do much in this movie, but still was there, was Flash Thompson, who was a character I was really interested to see his reaction to Peter being revealed as Spider-Man. We didn't really get the full effect of that, but you did see that once he finds out about that news, he dyes his hair blonde, just like how Flash is blonde in the comics, and he basically becomes a friend of Spider-Man, is really taking advantage of that. He wrote a book and everything. So I thought that was interesting. I wish we got more of that character in this film, but the little we did get, it's understandable, and I did enjoy what we did get. Then, though, of course, during this whole identity reveal fiasco, that is where we get the cameo of Charlie Cox as Matthew Murdoch. And oh, it is so good to see him back. I mean, we just got the return of Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin in Hawkeye Episode 5. Now we're getting Charlie Cox back as Daredevil. Oh, life could not be better. I mean, if I had a girlfriend, that would be nice. But, yeah, back to the movie. It's just so good to see him back, and like he literally felt exactly like the same character from the series. Like there was no difference between the character, and of course it was a very short cameo, but short but sweet, because they had that moment where the brick came flying in through the window and he caught it, and Peter was like, "Whoa, how did you do that?" And he's like, "I'm just a great lawyer." And obviously that's hinting at the fact that he's Daredevil, he's a superhero, and we're going to be seeing him more in the MCU. There's been rumors he's going to show up in She-Hulk. He's going to have his own spin-off series from Echo. He's going to show up in Echo and that spin-off series, and then get his own Disney Plus series, all that stuff. I'm so excited to see his future in the MCU, because I absolutely love his character, so I'm so glad to see that he is back. But after that, like I said, the rest of the movie does focus on the whole identity thing, but more so from the multiverse front. Which all starts with Doctor Strange, because of course he cast a spell to try and basically erase the memories from everybody that knows that Peter's Spider-Man, but then they end up messing up the spell, and that brings our villains into this universe. And Doctor Strange, he didn't have as big of a role in this movie as I thought he would, but I'm happy with it, because, if he had any bigger of a role, he would have taken over the film. So I really like his role in this film. He works really well here. And of course, again, he is the one that brings all these villains to this universe, even though it's still technically Peter's fault. So speaking of villains, let's talk about our villains. Starting off with the first one introduced here, with Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus. This was probably, him and Green Goblin were my favorite of the villains, because, Alfred Molina, he's just such an amazing actor that he just, again, embodies that same exact character from Spider-Man 2, probably the best, if not just one of the best, live-action Spider-Man villains of all time. So seeing him back here, seeing him being controlled by the tentacles, his fight with Tom Holland's Iron Spider on the bridge, of course, that big bridge battle that was teased in so many trailers, and then seeing him act after he's redeemed, after his inhibitor chip is fixed, and seeing that more heroic side of Otto. I did really enjoy seeing that as well. It was really cool to see, and also how he actually had the nanotech on his tentacles, and then how he gave that to Peter, which then turned his Far From Home suit into the kind of integrated suit that was like part Far From Home suit, but also part Iron Spider suit. So that was really cool. I wasn't expecting that, but yeah, Doc Ock, just to see him back in this film was so cool to see. But then we have Lizard and Salmon, who are definitely the two smallest members of the group in terms of screen time, because they don't really do as much. And really the main reason for that is because they didn't even get the actors back for the roles. Obviously they have Thomas Hayden Church and Rhys Ifans doing the voices for these characters, but you can tell very clearly that they didn't actually get those actors back on set. And yes, you may be wondering like, wait, but we did see them in their human forms at the end of this film. Well, if you didn't figure it out already, that is actually reused footage from Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man of those actors in those roles. So, yeah, they were never on set, which, you know, because of the pandemic and COVID reasons, it makes sense. It sucks, and I would have really loved to see more of specifically Sandman in his human form throughout this film. But what we did get from them was really cool. Sandman's one of my favorite Spider-Man villains, so seeing him back here, and they did have honestly some good explanations for him turning to the bad side once again. And yeah, I just really enjoyed seeing them back here. Just wish they did more, but again, it's understandable because they couldn't get the actors back on set. Then we have, of course, Jamie Foxx's return as Electro, the one that really started this all. He was the first one to be revealed to be returning for this film, the first started the spark of rumors of this being a multiverse movie. He is back here, and he is so good because Electro gets, of course, this major upgrade, known as being one of the worst Spider-Man villains in live action, which I just watched The Amazing Spider-Man 2 the other night, and yes, that's still the worst Spider-Man movie, but I love how when he first comes into this universe, he's still blue. I love that he's not automatically yellow. I love that they kind of show how he charges up when he first gets into this universe, and they kind of do a brief explanation of how he's now gotten his upgrade and all of a sudden is looking all good and handsome and, you know, Jamie Foxxified here, and not the complete nerd that he was in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I did like that little bit of explanation there, and just his thirst for power, and also how he could sense the energy around him and his obsession with like the Stark arc reactors and everything. I did really enjoy his character arc in this movie, and that's something that's really cool with all these villains, is because they're not just stuck in here just to be there. I mean, that could be argued with Sandman and Lizard, but they all have their own various arcs in this film, even though some are smaller than others. And of course we do at the end of this film, for Electro's character, I love how you have that interaction between him and Andrew's Peter, where Peter says, like, you're not a nobody, and of course making the references back to that film. And then I loved even more how we actually got a reference to Miles Morales, how Max Dillon, Jamie Foxx's Electro, said like, oh, I always thought you'd be black, and now I'm kind of disappointed, but hopefully maybe there is a black Spider-Man out there, and of course we know there is, Miles Morales, hopefully hinting at and foreshadowing that we will be getting Miles Morales in live action at some point down the road, which I would absolutely love to see. But guys, this is the big one. Green Goblin, Willem Dafoe, baby, he's back in such a good way. Like, like I said, I rewatched all the Spider-Man movies before watching No Way Home, and specifically that first Spider-Man movie really surprised me because it'd been so long since I'd watched these movies, specifically the Tobey Maguire movies and the Andrew Garfield films, and because when I did watch those movies, I was a lot younger, so first of all, I probably didn't understand them as much, and also I probably honestly wasn't even paying attention as much, but actually sitting down and watching these films and really getting to get the full experience of them, I just loved it so much, and really made me appreciate these characters and the return in this film even more, specifically with Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, because I absolutely loved him in that first Spider-Man film, but somehow they do even better with the character in No Way Home, because they really, really play up the whole split personality of Norman Osborn and Green Goblin in this movie. And that's one of the things that was so cool, because when you start this off, like, he is just Norman Osborn. He's super innocent. He's acting like a homeless person. And he's like working together with Peter, trying to figure out all these cures for the villains. And then all of a sudden he just snaps and then automatically takes that dark turn to his darker side as the Green Goblin. And that's where things just start going wrong here. Very wrong, because Green Goblin in this movie is so brutal. He is by far definitely the main villain, even though he doesn't do that much in the movie. The things he does do are big, like for example killing Aunt May, which was absolutely insane. We'll talk about that a little bit separately when we talk about Aunt May, but just Green Goblin in this movie was amazing. His presence in this film, and especially at the end of it with his final battle with Tom Holland's Peter, it's just beautiful. And that's because of Willem Dafoe's performance here, just having that psychotic laugh and the smile as Peter was just punching his face in. And also just like, also when they were in the apartment and Green Goblin was like punching Peter through the floors, it just shows you how powerful this guy is. And I just absolutely loved it. But like I said, the big thing he does in this film is kill Marissa Tomei's Aunt May, which was something I, again, knew about, kinda. I mean, I had heard things about it. I was hoping it wasn't true. Apparently it was true. But when I did hear about those at first, and those rumors, I was super upset by it. I was like, if Aunt May dies in this movie, sure, it'll add stakes and be like, oh, Peter has consequences and everything. But I'm going to absolutely hate that, because Peter Parker and Spider-Man without Aunt May, that just doesn't work. But the way they do it in this movie is so, so perfect and so heartbreaking. Her death is definitely one of those big moments where I definitely teared up and started to cry in this film, because it's so emotional, because, you know, when Green Goblin first hits her with his glider, they kind of trick you and like fake you out there. Like when she first gets hit, at first I was thinking like, oh my god, it's going to be like the first Spider-Man movie when Green Goblin did that and then he ended up stabbing himself. But this time she's going to get stabbed by the glider. And she didn't get stabbed, or at least I don't think she did, but she got hit pretty hard. And at first I was like, oh great, she's dead. But then they kind of tricked us and they're like, oh, she's fine. Even she thought like, oh, I'm just catching my breath. And Tom Holland's Peter Parker was like, oh yeah, you're going to be okay. We just got to walk it off and everything. And they trick you. And it's like, she doesn't know that she's dying, but then she does. And oh, again, this is where I was like kind of upset by it, because I was like, all right, they're just killing off Aunt May just so that they can kill somebody off. But then the way they do it, with her giving the line of with great power comes great responsibility, filling that role of Uncle Ben, which is kind of weird. You gotta admit that, like, I guess Uncle Ben did die, but he just never did the great power, great responsibility thing, and never really did that big of an impact on Peter's life. But just seeing that in this film and seeing Aunt May fill that role was so perfect. And, you know, if I really think about it, it works so well, because then by the end of this film, he truly is alone. And, like, he doesn't have even his aunt to rely on, even any guardian. He is 100% completely alone. And again, because of the performances, there's so many amazing performances in this film. Because of Marissa Tomei in this scene, it just gets you in the feels, and there's just so many feelings here. And then Tom Holland, his reaction as Peter Parker, and just the depression and the sadness and the loss and guilt and grief and all those things wrapped into one, of course, leads to his meeting with the other Spider-Man, which of course is the big thing, the worst kept secret in Hollywood. We all knew it was coming, but actually seeing it happen was so good. It was a little weird at first, I do have to admit. Like, after hearing all these rumors and all these leaks about them being in this movie, seeing it actually happen was weird, and it was kind of like a moment of like, wait, is this actually happening? And it was. And they did look a little weird, I gotta admit, because, you know, like with the villains, they de-aged them using de-aging tech. Toby and Andrew, they didn't, so they just looked like Toby and Andrew do in real life. But I loved it. You know, after that first initial moment, I absolutely loved it. And of course, my theater, you know, you had the claps and the cheers and everything as soon as they walked on screen. And it was just so satisfying seeing them in this film. Especially after rewatching all those films within this past week. It really, really helped bring that full experience to the forefront. And this whole time that we've been thinking about and knowing that they were in this movie, I never really thought about what it would be like them being in this movie. I thought, really, the only thing I thought about was like, all right, cool, they're going to show up. It's going to be 3 Spider-Man versus the Sinister Six or whatever. But I never really thought about the actual interactions between the 3 Spider-Men and what that would really mean for this movie. But it's done so well because all 3 of them, they have unique personalities, but with the same core aspects of Peter Parker Spider-Man. And that's something that's executed so well here. And speaking of that, because they are 3 different Peter Parkers, another thing that I never even thought about is because, like in these videos when we're talking about them, we obviously call them Tom, Toby, and Andrew, but in the movie they can't do that because they're all Peter Parker. So I love how they have the system of Peter 1, Peter 2, and Peter 3, and how when they were in the lab and Ned said Peter and they all responded, just little things like that was awesome. And seeing their dynamics, their dynamics in this movie was just so good. Seeing their almost brotherly relationship and lines like, I've always wanted brothers, I love you guys, it's what we do. Like, just their relationship, seeing them consoling each other, seeing them relate to each other and their connections, and Toby and Andrew kind of giving advice and almost kind of mentoring Tom in a way, but then also seeing Tom, because it is his movie, taking the lead in that battle at the end, and seeing the 3 of them work together was so good. And another moment that I teared up and got emotional, but this time it was for tears of joy, just because it was so beautiful and such an epic moment to see those 3 Spider-Man suited up together, swinging around the Statue of Liberty. It just felt so good. It reminds me of Avengers Endgame when you saw all of the Avengers lined up and they were just charging into battle. I teared up then too, just because that's like a dream come true right there, and it's so amazing. And of course they are the same exact versions of those characters from those movies, and also, just like these villains, even though they are smaller, they do still get kind of their little own story arcs here, at least kind of set up to kind of tell you what they've been up to since their last films and like where their story could be going. Not so much with Toby. I mean, they kind of explain that, like, he and MJ, they kind of worked things out and got back together, and they kind of lived their happy ending. But specifically with Andrew's Peter Parker, this is the one that I loved seeing so much. He honestly was a complete scene stealer, like his emotion and then also his jokes and all of his references to Gwen. Like, you just felt it, especially again after watching that the other day. And that being my favorite thing about those Amazing Spider-Man movies is the chemistry and the relationship between Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. It's just seeing him reference that here, and that loss is so good, and how things of course kind of come full circle at the end when he's the one that saves MJ, so he kind of gets that little bit of a resolution in a way there. And like I said, they are the same characters, so bringing back these characters from these past movies, you're of course going to get a bunch of fan service, and wow, we get a lot of fan service in this movie. And I know a lot of people don't usually like fan service. I always love it because it's fan service. That's kind of the point of it, is it's stuff that we want to see. So I always love seeing fan service, and especially in this movie, all the references and callbacks, like Norman Osborn, Green Goblin saying, I'm something of a scientist myself, and also just that moment of Toby and Andrew, Andrew cracking Toby's back, and he's like, oh, my back, because he said that in was it Spider-Man 2, I think it was, or was it Spider-Man 1? I don't remember which one it was, but that was just absolutely great. And then also the moment where Tom's like, hey, what are the craziest villains you've ever fought? And then they reference the villains that are not returning for this movie. Of course, Toby references all like this crazy black alien goo, which of course is Venom. And then Andrew saying like, oh wow, you guys are so cool. I just fought like a Russian in a rhinoceros suit. And yeah, it's so cool. So cool seeing these interactions. So satisfying and so worth it after going on that journey of all these films over the years. But it is Tom Holland's Spider-Man movie, so of course we gotta wrap up his storyline here because it is the conclusion to his trilogy. And again, they wrap it up so well. Again, it was one of my theories. The way that they do it is that they do this spell again, and then Peter would have to truly face the consequences of that, where literally everybody would forget that he is Spider-Man. But not only that, but in this version of the spell, literally everyone forgets that Peter Parker even existed as a person, which I thought was really super interesting. But hey, I'm not going to get into plot holes and all that stuff too much, but it's just is just so emotional and so hard hitting to this version of Peter Parker, which is a good thing from our point of view, because, you know, that's how this Peter truly becomes Spider-Man. But, like, he's lost everything. Not only did his Aunt May just die, he never even had an Uncle Ben. Also, his Iron Man Tony Stark died recently as well, kinda. But he just lost his girlfriend now. He lost his best friend. MJ and Ned get into MIT, and just that moment of them saying goodbye, and then you see how when Peter, after the spell is cast and he goes into the diner to tell them that, like, hey, all this went on, like, you know, basically explain everything, and how he decides not to, because he sees that they're happy with their lives now. They got into MIT, and he kind of realizes, like, maybe they would be better off without knowing me, and I'm just gonna have to go off and live on my own. And that's exactly what he does. You have Peter Parker moving into a new apartment, and you have somebody off screen yelling rent, which of course is probably a reference to Mr. Djokovic in the Raimi movies. And he's all alone now. He's in his brand new apartment, living on his own. We have no idea his school status, if he was able to graduate high school, if he's going to college. We don't know exactly the status of that, but we do know that he's all on his own. And then another moment that got me super emotional is when he was, like, unpacking his things, and then he pulled out the Lego Emperor Palpatine, which is, of course, from Spider-Man Homecoming, which I just watched this morning, yesterday morning by the time you're seeing this video, where Ned and Peter were building the Lego Death Star together. So he pulls that out, and even though they're probably never going to see each other again, you know, it's for the memories, and it's just so good. It's literally the perfect ending. And then the final scene of the movie is Tom Holland's Peter Parker putting on a brand new suit, probably the best live-action Spider-Man suit I've ever seen. It's the classic red and blue, and it's got, like, the front logo is the logo, or at least a similar logo to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, and then the front spider on the logo of the suit is Andrew's logo. So he took inspiration from them, and now he's going on to become Spider-Man. He's pushing forward past all of this adversity and all of this loss, and he is still going to be Spider-Man, because with great power comes great responsibility. And that's how you know that this man just became a man. He just basically went from Spider-Boy to now he is officially, finally, the Spider-Man that we all know and love, and also just really feel bad for. So I just love it. I just absolutely love this ending. It is so perfect for this trilogy. Of course, we know that Tom Holland's Peter Parker is going to continue in his second trilogy, and this gets me so excited to see that, with so many possibilities to come. And this is just a great way to end off this trilogy and transition into what comes next, which, of course, some of those things are set up in the post-credit scenes here, which I'm going to be talking about in a separate video, possibly 2 separate videos. So stay tuned for that. They may be out today, maybe out tomorrow. We'll see. Just depends on scheduling and all that stuff. But yeah, guys, Spider-Man No Way Home, 10 out of 10. I love it. It's so good. Obviously, it's not a perfect movie, but there's so much here going on that I absolutely love, and it's just such a wonderful experience seeing all of these things come to life on the screen, that I just am so happy that this exists. It's just so amazing. I'm so happy with it. But guys, what did you think about it? What did you think about Spider-Man No Way Home? Did it live up to your hype? What were your thoughts on it? Did you love it as much as I did? And where do you think things are going to go next in the future with Tom Holland's Peter Parker in the MCU? So anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. Please drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and hit the subscribe button so I can keep you up to date on everything that goes on in the Marvel life.